Marcus Chen was 12 years old, and he loved hiking alone in the mountains near his home in Washington State. He had been walking for 2 hours through the tall pine trees when something strange happened in the sky above him. A bright light appeared from nowhere, and it was moving fast, and it was getting bigger, and it was coming down toward the earth. The light was not like anything Marcus had ever seen before, because it was many colors at once, and the colors kept changing and shifting like a rainbow that was alive. Marcus stopped walking and watched the light fall from the sky, and then there was a terrible sound like thunder mixed with screaming metal, and the ground shook under his feet. He saw smoke rising from deep in the forest. About a mile away from where he stood, his heart was beating very fast, and every part of his brain was telling him to run home and tell his parents what he had seen, but something else inside him was curious, and that curiosity was stronger than his fear. Marcus started walking toward the smoke. He walked for 20 minutes through thick bushes and over fallen logs, until he came to a place where the trees had been knocked down in a big circle. In the middle of the circle, there was a crater, and inside the crater, there was something that made Marcus forget how to breathe. It was a ship, but it was not like any ship he had seen in movies or video games. The ship looked like it had been grown instead of built, and its surface looked like scales instead of metal. The scales were cracked and broken, and some kind of blue liquid was leaking out of the ship, and the liquid was glowing softly in the afternoon light. Marcus climbed down into the crater very carefully because the ground was hot and steam was rising from the dirt. When he got close to the ship, he could see that part of it had broken open, and there was a space inside that was still glowing with warmth. He looked inside, and he saw something that changed his life forever. There was an egg sitting in the middle of a small chamber, and the egg was about the size of a basketball. The shell of the egg was the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen, because it was covered in swirling colors that he could not name, and the colors moved across the surface like clouds moving across the sky. Around the egg there was a faint blue light that flickered like a candle in the wind, and Marcus somehow knew that this light was protecting the egg, but the light was dying. He reached out his hand toward the egg, and when his fingers got close to the shell, he felt something touch his mind. It was not a voice, and it was not a picture, but it was a feeling that came from somewhere outside his own head. The feeling was fear, and it was loneliness, and it was the desperate hope of something very young that did not want to die. Marcus understood in that moment that there was a living creature inside the egg, and that creature was running out of time. The blue light flickered again, and this time it went out completely, and Marcus felt the fear in his mind grow stronger. He put his hands on the egg, and it was warm, but he could feel that the warmth was fading, and the egg was starting to get cold. He did not think about what he was doing because there was no time to think. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around the egg, and picked it up and held it against his chest. The egg was heavy, but not too heavy, and Marcus could feel something moving inside it very slowly. He climbed out of the crater with the egg in his arms, and he started running through the forest toward his home. He ran faster than he had ever run before because he knew that the creature inside the egg was dying, and he was the only one who could save it. His lungs burned and his legs hurt, but he did not stop running. When he got to his house, he was lucky because his parents were not home yet, and he was able to carry the egg up to his room without anyone seeing him. He put the egg on his bed and wrapped it in blankets, and then he found a heating pad in the closet and put that around the egg too. Marcus sat on the floor next to his bed and looked at the egg, and he was shaking all over because of what he had just done. He had found an alien ship that had crashed in the forest, and he had taken an alien egg and brought it home, and now he was trying to keep it alive. He was just a 12-year-old boy, and he had no idea what he was supposed to do. But when he looked at the egg and saw those beautiful colors swirling across the shell, he knew that he could not give up. Whatever was inside, that egg had reached out to him with its mind and asked him for help. and he had felt its fear and its hope. Marcus made a decision in that moment that would change the history of humanity forever. He was going to save this creature no matter what it took. He did not know that far above the Earth, in the cold darkness of space, there were other ships watching and waiting. He did not know that by taking the egg, he had started something that could not be stopped. He only knew that something needed his help, and he was going to give it. The egg pulsed with faint color as if it could sense his determination. And Marcus smiled and whispered that everything was going to be okay. Outside his window, the sun was setting, and the first stars were appearing in the sky. Somewhere among those stars, enemies were coming, and they would arrive sooner than anyone expected. But for now, in this small room in this small town, a human boy sat next to an alien egg and refused to let it die. That was the beginning of everything. Marcus told his parents that he was sick with the flu, and they believed him because he looked tired and pale from worry. For 3 days he stayed in his room with the door locked, and he did everything he could think of to keep the egg warm. He searched the internet for information about how to incubate eggs, but nothing he found, because this was not a chicken egg or a snake egg or any kind of egg that existed on Earth. The heating pad helped a little, but the egg was still getting colder every day, and Marcus could fear growing stronger in the back of his mind. He barely slept because every time he closed his eyes, he felt the creature inside the egg calling out to him. On the second day, he tried putting the egg in warm water, but that did not work either. He tried holding it against his body for hours at a time, and that seemed to help more than anything else. But he could not hold it forever. Marcus was exhausted and scared, and he did not know what else to do. On the third night, something changed inside him. He was sitting on his bed with the egg in his lap, and tears were running down his face because he felt like he was failing. The creature inside the egg was going to die, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. And then Marcus did something that felt strange, but also felt completely natural. He started talking to the egg. He told the egg about his life and about his school and about how the other kids sometimes made fun of him because he was small for his age. He told the egg about his dream of becoming an astronaut someday and traveling to other planets and seeing things that no human had ever seen before. He told the egg about his dog who had died last year and how much he still missed her. He told the egg that he was scared because he did not know how to help, and he was just a kid, and he did not have any special powers or special knowledge. He told the egg that he was sorry if he was not enough, and then Marcus said something that came from the deepest part of his heart. He said that even if he could not save the creature inside, he would stay with it until the end, because no one should have to die alone. The moment those words left his mouth, something amazing happened. The egg began to glow with warm light, and the colors on the shell started moving faster and faster. Marcus felt a wave of warmth spread through his hands and up his arms and into his whole body. The fear that had been living in the back of his mind for 3 days started to fade, and something new took its place. It was hope, and it was gratitude, and it was the feeling of a connection being formed between two living beings. Marcus held the egg close and watched the colors dance across the shell, and he knew that something had changed. He fell asleep like that with the egg in his arms, and for the first time in 3 days, he slept peacefully. He woke up at 3 in the morning to a cracking sound. The egg was shaking in his arms, and cracks were spreading across the beautiful shell. Marcus put the egg on his bed and watched with wide eyes as pieces of the shell started falling away. A small head pushed through one of the cracks, and Marcus saw the most incredible creature he had ever seen. It was like a snake, but it had tiny wings folded against its body, and its scales shimmered with the same colors that had been on the egg. The creature was about as long as his forearm, and it was wet from being inside the egg, and it was looking at him with eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 years of wisdom. Marcus could not move, and he could not speak, and he could barely breathe. The creature opened its tiny mouth and made a soft sound that was almost like singing, and Then Marcus heard a voice in his mind, but this time it was clear and strong. The voice said two words that made tears come to his eyes again. The voice said, "You stayed." Marcus nodded and whispered that of course he stayed, because he had promised. The creature looked at him for a long moment, and then it said something else. It said, "Your kind stays." And there was wonder in that voice, like this was something the creature had never expected. Marcus reached out his hand slowly, and the creature climbed onto his palm and curled up there like it belonged. He could feel the connection between them growing stronger with every heartbeat. He did not know what the creature was, or where it came from, or what was going to happen next, but he knew that they were bonded now, and that bond would last forever. He decided to call the creature Vel, because that was the sound it made when it was. Happy Vel looked up at him with those ancient eyes, and Marcus felt a rush of images and feelings flow into his mind. He saw stars and planets and ships made of living material flying through space. He saw creatures like Vel, but much larger, flying through the clouds of alien worlds, and he saw darkness and fire and fear because something terrible was chasing them. Marcus understood that Vel was not just a strange animal. Vel was a refugee from somewhere far away, and something very dangerous was coming. The sun was rising outside his window, and a new day was beginning. But Marcus knew that nothing would ever be the same again. In the days that followed, the hatching Vel grew quickly, and Marcus learned many things through the bond they shared. Vel could not speak with words, the way humans did, but the creature could send images and feelings and memories directly into Marcus's mind. The images came in flashes like dreams, and sometimes they were confusing, but Marcus started to understand them better each day. He learned that Vel's species was called the Dretheri, and they were ancient beings who had traveled among the stars for millions of years. The Dretheri could do something that no other species in the galaxy could do. They could touch the energy that existed between dimensions, and they could shape that energy into fire and light. This power made them beautiful and wonderful, but it also made them hunted. Vel showed Marcus images of a great alliance of alien species called the Hegemony. The Hegemony believed that the Dretheri were too dangerous to exist because their power could not be controlled or copied. For thousands of years, the Hegemony had hunted the Dretheri across the galaxy and killed them wherever they found them. Vel's mother had been one of the last survivors, and she had been running for a very long time. She had come to Earth because she thought it might be safe here. She thought that a primitive planet with no space travel would be beneath the notice of the Hegemony. She was wrong. Vel showed Marcus the last memory from the mother's mind, and it made Marcus cry. The mother had been injured when her ship entered Earth's atmosphere, and she knew she was dying. She had wrapped her last egg in a stasis field and used the last of her strength to send out a mental cry for help. She had died hoping that someone would find her child, and someone had. Marcus held Vel close and promised that he would never let anything bad happen. But then Vel showed him something that made his blood turn cold. The Hegemony had tracking devices that could follow the energy signature of a Dretheri across light years of space. When Vel's mother had died, her energy had flared one last time, and the Hegemony had detected it. Their ships were already in orbit around Earth. They were studying the planet and preparing their forces, and they would arrive on the surface within 12 hours. Vel showed Marcus what the Hegemony did to planets that sheltered Dretheri. They burned them. They killed every living thing and turned the planet into ash and dust so that no one would ever help a Dretheri again. Marcus felt fear like he had never felt before, because this was not just about him and Vel anymore. This was about everyone on Earth. Every person he knew and every person he would never meet was in danger because of the choice he had made in that crater. For a moment he thought about what the smart thing would be. He could surrender Vel to the Hegemony, and maybe they would spare humanity. He could sacrifice one creature to save 8 billion people. That was the logical thing to do. But when he looked at Vel curled up in his lap, looking at him with those trusting ancient eyes, He knew that he could not do it. Vel was a child just like him. Vel was scared and alone and had lost everything. And Marcus had promised to protect this creature, no matter what. Humanity did not become great by sacrificing children to monsters. Marcus made his decision, and he picked up his phone. He called his best friend Tommy and told him everything. Tommy did not believe him at first, but then Marcus sent him a video of Vel, and Tommy went silent for a long time. When Tommy spoke again, his voice was shaking, but he said he would help. Marcus called another friend, and then another, and soon his phone was buzzing with messages. People were sharing his story on social media, and at first most people thought it was a joke or a hoax. But then more videos appeared of the strange lights in the sky above the small mountain town. People started to believe, and something incredible began to happen. Humans started to get angry, not at Marcus and not at Vel, but at the idea that some alien bullies thought they could come to Earth and threaten a child. Messages started spreading across the internet saying that Earth protects its own. People started making plans and sharing ideas and reaching out to each other. Marcus watched his phone in amazement as the whole world seemed to wake up and choose to fight. He did not know if they could win. He did not know if they had any chance at all against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations. But he knew that humanity was not going to surrender without trying. Vel looked up at him, and for the first time since the hatching, Marcus felt hope in the bond between them. "You are strange creatures," Vel's voice said in his mind. "You know you cannot win, but you fight anyway." Marcus smiled and said that was what humans did. They fought for the things they loved, even when the odds were impossible. Outside the window, the sun was setting, and 12 hours was becoming 11 hours. Somewhere up in space, the enemy was watching and waiting. But down on Earth, humanity was rising to meet them. The news spread faster than anyone thought possible. Within 6 hours, every person on Earth with access to a phone or a computer knew about the alien child and the enemy coming to destroy their world. Governments were confused and scared and did not know what to do. But the people were not waiting for governments to decide. They started moving on their own. Cars and trucks and buses began driving toward the small mountain town in Washington state. People came from Seattle and Portland and San Francisco and cities even farther away. They came alone and in groups and in families. They brought whatever they thought might be useful. A retired engineer named Frank, who had worked on satellite shielding for NASA, drove through the night with a van full of equipment. A teenager from Seoul named Ji Yeon, who was a genius at hacking, had broken into the hegemony's communication frequencies and was listening to their transmissions. An indigenous elder named Mary from a nearby reservation came with stories that had been passed down for generations about sky serpents who once visited her people long ago. She said the old stories talked about a promise that was made between humans and the star creatures. She said the promise was still binding. Thousands of people gathered in the fields and streets around Marcus's town, and they kept coming, even as the night grew darker. Marcus stood on his porch with Vel wrapped around his shoulders and watched the crowd grow. He could not believe what he was seeing. These people had left their homes and their jobs and their comfortable lives to come and stand with a creature they had never met. He felt Vel's amazement through their bond. The Drethri had traveled to many worlds over millions of years, and they had never seen anything like this. Most species did the logical thing when the hegemony came. They surrendered, or they ran, or they pretended they had never seen the Drethri at all. No species had ever stood up and said no. At midnight, the hegemony broadcast their ultimatum on every frequency and every screen on Earth. A cold alien voice spoke words that were translated into every human language. The voice said that Earth was harboring a dangerous criminal species. The voice said that if the Drethri was delivered to them within 1 hour, they would leave and never return. The voice said that if Earth refused, they would make an example that the galaxy would never forget. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the responses began from New York and London and Tokyo and Mumbai and every city and town on Earth. The same message came back. The message said the child is ours, and you will not take them. The message said, come and get them. If you dare. The hegemony had conquered 1,000 worlds and destroyed 100 species. They had never received a response like this from anyone. They did not understand it. In their minds, a primitive species like humanity should be begging for mercy, not issuing challenges. The hegemony commander looked at his tactical displays and saw a planet with no spaceships and no energy shields and no weapons that could hurt his fleet. He saw a planet that should be easy to break. He gave the order to descend and teach these creatures their place. The first wave of hegemony ships broke through the atmosphere like falling stars. They came down expecting to find terrified primitives running and hiding and screaming for help. They found something very different. Frank, the retired engineer, had spent the night building electromagnetic pulse devices from car batteries and copper wire and parts from 100 different machines. When the first ships got close enough, Frank pressed a button and the night lit up with crackling energy. The hegemony shields, which were designed to stop advanced energy weapons, flickered and failed against this crude burst of electromagnetic noise. Geon, the teenage hacker, had been feeding false information into the hegemony sensors for hours. When the ships tried to scan for the Drethry, their equipment told them the creature was in 100 different places at once. The pilots became confused and angry and started making mistakes. Humans with hunting rifles and shotguns could not destroy the hegemony ships, but they could damage the sensor pods and the landing gear and the communication arrays. The ships that landed were swarmed by thousands of humans who threw rocks and bottles and used cutting torches on their hulls. The hegemony had expected this to be over in minutes. Instead, they found themselves fighting for every inch of ground. Marcus watched from his porch as his species rose up to protect a child that was not even human. He felt tears running down his face because he had never been so proud to be a human being. Vel was glowing on his shoulders, and the glow was getting brighter. Something was changing inside the little creature. Something was growing. The bond between Marcus and Vel was pulsing with energy, and through that bond Vel was connecting to every human who had come to fight. The love and courage and stubborn refusal to surrender was flowing into Vel like fuel into a fire, and Vel was beginning to burn. The hegemony commander watched from orbit as his ground forces struggled against the humans. He could not understand what was happening. These creatures had no technology that should threaten his soldiers. They had no weapons that could pierce hegemony armor, and yet his forces were being pushed back by farmers with pitchforks and teenagers with baseball bats and old women with kitchen knives. He ordered more ships to descend and overwhelm the resistance with pure numbers. But something was happening on the surface that made him hesitate. There was an energy reading coming from the center of the human settlement. The reading was small at first, but it was growing stronger every second. It was Drethry energy, but it was different from anything the hegemony had ever recorded. It was being amplified by something, and the commander did not know what. Marcus stood in the middle of the town square, with Vel still wrapped around his shoulders. But Vel was not small anymore. The little creature that had hatched from the egg 3 days ago was growing before everyone's eyes. Vel's body stretched and expanded, and the scales that had been beautiful before now blazed with light that hurt to look at. Wings that had been tiny unfolded into vast sheets of shimmering energy. Marcus should have been afraid, but he was not. He could feel Vel in his mind more clearly than ever before. He could feel the love that Vel had for him and for all the humans who had come to stand and fight. And he could feel something else. He could feel the reason why Vel was growing so fast. The Drethry did not mature through time the way human children did. They matured through connection. They matured through bonds with other living beings. It usually took decades for a Drethry to form enough bonds to reach adulthood. But in 3 days, Marcus had given Vel something that his species rarely experienced. He had given Vel a connection to an entire world. Every human who had come to fight was now linked to Vel through Marcus. Their courage flowed into the young dragon like water into a dry riverbed. Their love and their defiance and their stubborn refusal to abandon a child in need fed the fire inside. Vel and Vel transformed the creature. That rose into the night sky was not a hatchling anymore. Vel was massive and ancient, looking with scales that burned like captured stars and wings that spread across the sky like the northern lights made solid. Vel opened a mouth full of dimensional fire and roared. The sound shook the mountains and shattered windows for miles around the hegemony. Ships that were descending through the atmosphere stopped and hovered. The soldiers on the ground stopped fighting and stared upward. No one had ever seen a Drethari reach full maturity so quickly. It should have been impossible, but the hegemony had never faced anything like humanity before. And then something even more incredible happened. Lights began appearing in the sky. They came from the darkness between the stars, and they came fast. Dozens of lights at first, and then hundreds. The lights took shape as they got closer, and the shapes were dragons. Drethari, who had been hiding for centuries, emerged from their secret places. They had been scattered and alone, and they had given up hope of ever being safe again. But they had felt something that drew them across the void of space. They had felt the impossible resonance of a human boy's promise echoing through dimensions. They had felt a species that would rather fight and die than surrender a child to monsters, and they had come. The hegemony fleet found itself surrounded by creatures that could tear their ships apart with claws made of pure energy. The commander looked at his tactical displays and saw that the numbers had changed. For the first time in 10,000 years, the hegemony was outmatched. He ordered a retreat. The hegemony ships turned and fled into the darkness of space. They would not come back. Marcus stood in the town square and looked up at the sky filled with dragons. Vel circled above him, still burning with that incredible light. Through their bond, Marcus could feel Vel's gratitude and joy and amazement. "You saved me," Vel's voice echoed in his mind. Marcus shook his head and said that it was not just him. It was all of humanity. Vel descended slowly and landed in front of Marcus. Even though the dragon was now the size of a house, Vel's eyes were the same as they had been when they first looked at each other after the hatching. They were ancient and wise and full of love. "Your species is strange," Vel said through the bond. "You are small and fragile, and you have no claws or scales or fire, but you have something that we have never seen before. You have hearts that refuse to break." Marcus smiled and reached out his hand and touched Vel's massive snout. Around them, the crowd of humans began to cheer. They cheered for the victory and for the dragons and for the small boy who had started everything by refusing to let an egg die alone in the cold. The sun was rising over the mountains and the sky was clearing. The hegemony was gone and the Drethari were safe, and Earth had announced itself to the galaxy. They had announced that they were a species that protected children no matter the cost. They had announced that they kept their promises. They had announced that they would never surrender what they loved. The dragons never forgot what the humans did that night. And humanity never forgot that sometimes the most powerful thing in the universe is not a weapon or a shield or an army. Sometimes the most powerful thing is simply choosing to stay when everyone else would run away. Marcus Chen was 12 years old. He had saved a dragon's egg and changed the course of history. And he had done it by being exactly what humans have always been at their best: stubborn and loving and absolutely unwilling to give up. The sky was clear now, and the fire was fading, but the bond between humans and dragons would burn forever.